Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Audrey Anderson. I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications with Golden Shovel Agency. We're so happy to have you all here for our webinar today, the Economic Development Benefits of Community EV Charging. Our expert presenters will delve into all the numerous advantages that EV charging can bring to economic development in your community. We do want to extend a huge thank you to these presenters for sharing their insights and expertise with us today. We also want to express gratitude to all of you for taking the time to join us. Your participation is really what makes these sessions valuable and impactful. Speaking of that, if you have any questions, we will have a good chunk of time at the end for all of those. So please submit them to that Q&A section as soon as you think of them. If there's anything relevant, we'll address them as they come in. Otherwise, again, we'll have that time at the end. I also want to mention that this session will be recorded, so you can always go back to that recording and reference different information, and we'll be sending a copy of the slides to everyone that registered as well. So I am going to hand it off to Will Barrett and Will Tuchtenhagen, and we'll let them take it away.
Thank you. Yeah, great to be here. And I think we'll go ahead and get started. And you're still seeing the slides, right?
Yes, we can see them.
Okay, great. So I'm going to jump right in. I'll give you just a little bit of an introduction on who we are. Both Will and I are with Zeph Energy. So Zeph Energy, we were incorporated and started deploying charging infrastructure in 2014. We're headquartered in Minneapolis. Some of sort of our foundational values are quality, reliability, service, and support. We also work to support US manufacturing and US customer service and support in all the products that we deliver. We are employee and utility owned. So we actually started out deploying charging infrastructure in rural parts of the Midwest for a number of different electrical co-ops. And they were deployed for public charging within communities, also deployed for things like fleet, workplace, and home charging even. That's utility managed home charging. So we have a lot of experience deploying charging infrastructure. As we've expanded over time, we've developed a nationwide partnership with installers, service providers, to sort of be able to extend our footprint and have our charging products deployed. Now we're in over 40 states. We're in a number of Caribbean islands and a couple of provinces in Canada. So we've deployed over 5,500 charging stations or charging points, again, in a variety of different use cases. And we currently work with over 160 different utilities. We also work with a lot of municipal governments, so state, local governments, counties, and things like that. We manufacture level 2 charging products. So these are products that are going to refill vehicles over a number of hours. So typically in a public setting or in a community charging application, folks that use this level 2 type of equipment are going to be parked for an hour or two, or possibly even more. We also deploy DC fast charging products that are integrated with our network and management platform, which is also included in all of our level 2 products that allows you to do things like load control, pay for use, and other programs to attract users and sort of add value to that charging experience. With the DC fast charge products, those are typically something that a driver in a public use scenario is going to stop at for maybe 30 minutes. So 30, 45-minute kind of time frame versus level 2, which is, a couple to a few hours. All of our products include access to our ZephNet management platform, which includes a driver app, a mapping platform that we'll get into a little bit later. We have our own mapping platform that also integrates with other mapping platforms that allows drivers to be able to locate this equipment to be able to charge their vehicles. We also do operations, maintenance, and technical support offerings for all of the products that we deploy. So why are we talking about charging infrastructure? Why are we interested in it? Because electric vehicles are coming. They're being adopted at an increasing rate. And these next slides kind of talk a little bit about that. So in 2023, we hit 1.4 million electric vehicles sold in that year. The number of vehicles sold has essentially been increasing at an exponential rate year over year since about 2020. There are other times in the past where that's happened since vehicles were reintroduced in 2010. But currently, we've got over 4 million electric vehicles on the road today. The sales in 2023 were a 50% year-over-year increase compared to 2022. And the percentage of new car sales being electric has continued to increase. So you go from 3.1% in 2021 to 9.8% of new vehicles in 2023. Substantial increase over just a 2-year time period. So market trends and indicators, it's projected by a number of sources that by 2035, 50% of electric vehicle or 50% of vehicle sales in the U.S. Will be electric. Regionally, this 50% number could be achieved sooner. If, for example, in California, they're projecting by 2030 we'll have over 50% of new vehicle sales being electric. Other parts of the country may be lagging behind that, and so but 50% of sales across all of the U.S. being electric by 2035. Today, some of the barriers to increased electric vehicle penetration, reliable charging access is number one on the list. Of course, EV prices and supply of vehicles versus the demand. So prices are starting to come down, and there is an increase availability of different types of makes and models of vehicles. So just recently, in the last year and a half, 2 years, we've introduced electric pickup trucks. Electric crossovers have been popular for a long time, but sedans, SUVs, utility vehicles like Jeeps and things like that. You also have a number of sort of all of the major automakers in the U.S. committing to electrifying their vehicle fleet at very high percentages, 50 to 100%, over the next 10 to 15 years timeframe. So we're going to be seeing more and more of these vehicles driving through, our towns and cities in the coming years. So there's a lot of benefits to adding charging infrastructure within a community. So one of the things I kind of talked about a little bit earlier is these maps. So vehicles have in their infotainment systems locator maps where you type in your destination, and if it's an electric vehicle, it shows you where you can find charging along the way. Drivers will also utilize apps from service providers like Zeph Energy and others to be able to locate charging infrastructure, whether it's in their community or along the route to a destination that they plan to travel to. By installing charging infrastructure in a community, you get on that map, or on those maps, I should say. Drivers of electric vehicles will seek out locations that have charging. So getting yourself on the map, allows you to kind of be on the list of places that drivers may stop when they're on the way to something, or they may stop at, your store or within your community versus another, to be able to charge, whether they're local or kind of coming from far away. Through these same apps, you can also there's the ability to have promotions to draw drivers in. So there's, branding, the ability to, try and locate the equipment near a high interest business or a high interest destination. Um, and a number of these apps will allow a business or an entity that owns and operates the equipment to be able to incentivize drivers to come to their location versus another. That can be done through pricing promotions on the charging itself, or pricing promotions through like charge here, get a discount on X, Y, and Z while you're stopped in town. So
All right.
additional, oh, yeah.
Want me to hop in, Will, or do you want to keep
Yeah,
going?
sure, sure. Yeah, no, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, it's like sorry, it's like we're talking to ourselves out here. But, so yeah, economic development. Um, there's a lot of opportunities just for towns, cities, pretty much everything in between. One way that Zeph really has leaned into in the past few years is just the ability to help brand your community. EV chargers can effectively serve as a banner for local branding. And actually something that Zeph has done in the past few years is we've worked with like local utilities, whether it's a local co-op, a local municipality, and we've tried to encourage them to co-brand, put their logo on the charger alongside of ours. It's just a kind of a foundational way to let passerby know that EV charging is here, our community's open and thriving. We support this transition. It's a really good, a really helpful, effective way to brand the community. Um, and it's not just travelers that are going to utilize these chargers. I mean, number two here, locals will also use public charging as an amenity. If they have an EV, perhaps, if there's an EV charger at one grocery store and not another, maybe that'll help to influence where exactly they decide to do their shopping every week. It will help create more community foot traffic depending on where there's charging. Um, and then, it helps attract future residents and businesses, knowing that, you're kind of on the cutting edge, so to speak. You're installing public charging, you're supporting it, it kind of makes for more of a vibrant and exciting place to be, for future residents and businesses. Do you have anything to add on that, Will, or should we keep going?
Well, I like the picture in this slide that we have here, because it reminds me of sort of like, a kind of cool downtown area. There's a bunch of little shops. We've done a number of projects over the years where, charging equipment is installed in parking in areas like this. And it's a real opportunity to drive new traffic in. I think we've got a slide on it a little bit later, but like charging is also a destination for electric vehicle drivers. And this is a great way to kind of, increase foot traffic, like Will said, through locals that may sort of, kind of revisit an area that maybe they haven't been to within the town in a while because there's charging there, but also to draw in traffic from, outside the local community as well. I'll jump to the next one. And it's a good, kind of lead into, the benefits for a business to have charging. As we said, it attracts drivers, increases their kind of visibility on those mapping platforms. It says something to the customer around the fact that they're installing new technology, they're supporting sort of this green transportation, and it gives them a captive audience. So we see, as I mentioned earlier, level 2 charging is something that you're going to be there for, potentially a couple of hours. Even DC fast charging, 30 to 45 minutes. Great opportunity to stop at a local restaurant, or visit a store and buy a few things.
Yeah, I got one thing to add here, Will. Thanks. I love the term captive audience. I think it's a really great way to describe the fact that, I mean, you really are, a person charging an EV really is kind of beholden to doing or being involved in whatever the business offers. And one example that I've seen of that is my aunt and uncle recently bought a new electric car, and when to their, they have a cabin up in northern Wisconsin that they sometimes go to on the weekends. When they drive the electric car, they've pretty much changed their entire driving route just so they can hit a fast charger at a grocery store on the way up there. Um, and so like the grocery store, by installing the EV charger, has effectively gotten their business and boosted their sales just from this one person. And I think it's a really great. I like that this slide also says that it'll drive greater brand loyalty, because it definitely does do that. So I just think there's a lot of opportunities. We've talked a lot about locals. There's a lot of opportunities for travelers too. And captive audience is a good term to describe that. You can keep going, Will. Thanks. So one thing that we that Zeph has also taken note of, especially recently, is that EV charging doesn't have to be free to attract drivers. When EV chargers were really new tech first coming out, people were pretty skeptical, and a free EV charger looked a lot better than a paid one. But as the technology has evolved, especially in the last year or two, we've realized that, just like your ICE powered car, a gasoline powered car, fuel costs money. And people realize that. People aren't mad about that. So it's a really good way for communities, local businesses to kind of recoup some of their investment. They are in fact able to charge for the EV power. Now the exciting thing for the consumer is that the cost of EV power still isn't, doesn't really hold much of a candle to the cost of gas. But it still makes for an easier investment for a business, knowing that they can recoup funds from the charger. And then even if it does cost money, EV charging access alone draws more people to a community or neighborhood. Just knowing that it's there, it's really a good thing for them, good knowledge for them to have going in. Did you want to add anything, Will?
Yeah, and I would say that this picture on this side here is also sort of an example of the branding that Will T was touching on in the previous slide, where you can have community branding here. This example here is the EV Spot network, which we'll do a couple slides on that just as a real world example of some community charging and sort of the steps involved and funding and things like that. But it's branded St. Paul, Minneapolis, EV Spot Network. So they're able to kind of have that messaging, or the messaging that a community, a business, or anyone wants to have on the equipment, right out front and center there. And I would add too, as far as charging doesn't have to be free to attract drivers, that is definitely true. It needs to be reliable. And by having community charging and having multiple stakeholders invested in it, you really have an opportunity to kind of increase the reliability, especially if someone's going to put their brand on it. There's a lot more attention paid to that. And so I think that that's just something kind of important to call out, that the real thing that drivers are looking for are reliable access to being able to refill their vehicles. So real world example, a little bit of a deeper dive on the EV Spot network. We just kind of had the picture of one of those. Just to give you a quick overview, the EV Spot network is 70 charging locations powered curbside, powered by renewable energy. They're throughout the cities of Minneapolis, St. Paul. It's a combination of those level 2 and DC fast charge products, and they're all curbside charging, so within kind of the public right away. When the project concludes in 2025, there'll be a total of 280 charging ports available throughout the Twin Cities. They're being utilized by the public and also by an electric vehicle car share program. So the whole thing came together through a public-private partnership through multiple entities, multiple companies. It's a long-term project. Initial planning started in 2018. Deployments of the infrastructure started in 2021, and will continue through 2025. So this is, again, a long-term project. Working with local government, the utility, nonprofit, community organizations, and OEMs. OEMs, in this case, original equipment manufacturers, would be Zeph Energy and also General Motors, because they were part of the funding and coordination team. So leverage multiple funding source through multiple grants, public and private investments. And again, it's, I kind of like this program. Touches on planning, securing funding, working within the local community. There's a whole element of, finding the right sites, having them in the appropriate location to service the community and things like that. So it touches on a lot of different things. So this is just, kind of a screenshot of the partners in the program. So of course, City of St. Paul, City of Minneapolis, Our Car, that's the electric car share program. American Lung Association, 3M, through partnerships with American Lung Association and Clean Cities. We're able to leverage some grant funding from the Department of Energy. 3M, through their sort of corporate giving arm, provided some funding along with the McKnight Foundation and the Energy Foundation. So a whole lot of folks, kind of different entities working together to bring this project together. And as we look at, some of the site considerations, Will T, did you want to jump in on the site considerations at all?
Yes, definitely. Obviously, a lot of considerations get taken into account when you're trying to site an EV charger. There's a lot of good spots for EV chargers, but some of them just, they fit better than others. Especially in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, which it does have a pretty good public transit system. There are a lot of questions, including like, who's living there? What are the resident demographics? Is it houses? Is it apartments? What is it? And then that goes in hand with the density of renters, public housing. What type of neighborhood is it? Is it a charger that's going to get utilized? Is it a charger that's, right on a major street? Is it a charger that, people are gonna, are there businesses around? Some things like that. Looking at some of the population demographics, how many 1 and 0 vehicle households are there? Is it by public transit? Are people actually using the public transit? A lot of things like that, and what's around, is it too close to another already existing hub? We wouldn't want to put one, more than like or less than like a few minute drive from one another. We don't want them sitting next to each other necessarily. And then obviously one big thing in the Midwest is, is it in a spot where we can do snow removal? Because I'm sure, as you all know, we get a lot of snow up here, and the elements definitely are a factor. So we definitely, we want to take that into account. And then this bottom part just kind of talks about, are there ADA considerations? Is there bike parking nearby? Basically just what's in the area, and is there enough uninterrupted curb that's not going to be in like a illegal no parking zone or in front of a fire hydrant. And then the other thing I'll say about this EV spot network is it's really helped increase visibility of EV chargers all around Minneapolis and St. Paul, just because they're all on these public right-of-ways. I know for me, when I'm driving around Minneapolis, St. Paul with my friends, I'm insufferable constantly pointing out EV chargers to them, that much to their annoyance. But it's awesome. They're really easy to see. They're really easy to identify. The charger that we showed, the ZephNet Pro, is like a 7-foot beacon. So they're really quite easy to pick out. So definitely, a lot of good stuff there. Will, if there's anything else you have to add, that's all I've got.
Yeah, and I would just add this. So this example is for curbside charging. A lot of similar considerations would take place as it relates to sort of these siting requirements if you're putting charging within a parking lot. So if not on a curb in a parking lot, do you have adequate spaces, ADA considerations, um, you know, residential demographics, the location of the parking facility. Are there things to do nearby? Because again, it's a captive audience. They're going to be stopped for a while, so putting it at some faraway parking garage with just a bunch of businesses may limit the users that you draw into that, versus putting it in a shopping center or a area downtown where there's a number of restaurants and shops and things like that people can go to, or at a recreation facility, and so on. So these considerations are specific to curbside, but they definitely still apply, or they're very similar to considerations that you would take if you're installing it in a parking garage or parking facility as well. So within this project, there were also some additional considerations. Basically, bringing in all the local city divisions and city agencies to make sure that there are no conflicts. So water, sewer, traffic operations, transit authorities, and the electric utility, of course. Also outreach to property owners in the vicinity of where the equipment would be installed, because it's curbside, just to make sure that there were no unseen sort of conflicts. So at a high level, it's working with a whole bunch of partners to pull the program together, and then having that sort of engagement throughout the process with any city agency, local agencies, as well as property owners, just to make sure that there are no sort of hidden issues. And then again, just a little bit, with this program, a real focus on right sizing the infrastructure for the community. So these dots are kind of placement of the infrastructure, and you can see it's placed, it's well dispersed. So tried not to have any major gaps, but also, again, the equipment's not placed right next to each other. A lot of considerations around whether level 2 or DC fast charge equipment made sense at any of the given sites. The number of charging ports to put at a site, at a specific location. And then also just paying special attention to make sure that the infrastructure is placed to sort of support all neighborhoods. Extra consideration for areas that may be isolated from other charging infrastructure that might exist outside of the spot network program. So funding opportunities. Where is the money? And I'm going to kick it over to Will T for that.
Yeah, this is the $1 million question. Sometimes quite literally. But where's the money coming from? Will and I can tell you till the cows come home that there's a lot of federal funding out there, and there's never been a better time to take advantage of EV charging and or federal funding for EV charging. But what is an actual real world example of federal funding out there right now? Well, the biggest one that we've seen is called the Direct Pay Program, or sometimes referred to as elective pay. It's a new program introduced by the Inflation Reduction Act, basically enabling tax-exempt and governmental entities to receive a payment up to 30% of the total cost for building a qualified clean energy project. Then there's a cap of $100,000 per project, but that's still a really nice chunk of change for a tax-exempt nonprofit governmental entity to be able to get back. There's not necessarily any competition to it, Direct pay just allows entities to take advantage of the funding just as long as they meet all the requirements of the program, basically just meaning they're eligible. So eligible entities would include, a state, local government, or state governments, local governments, tribal entities, 501(c)(3)s in general, local co-ops, electric co-ops, which are technically a nonprofit. Pretty much anybody under that, as long as you technically declare a nonprofit status, you qualify for direct pay. So this is a really cool program, and we've been really actively promoting it to a lot of the small towns that we work with, or small communities around greater Minnesota. Or at least that's been a lot of my job lately. And it's really kind of changed the conversation a lot. People get a lot more interested in adding EV charging to their community once they realize there's a federal program like this to allow them to get 30% of their total cost back. Will, you can move on to the next slide. So what sorts of projects exactly are eligible for a direct pay grant? Well, there's technically 12 Inflation Reduction Act tax credits. I've just highlighted some of the main examples here. So generating clean energy through solar, wind, and battery storage, building a community solar project. Obviously, the one that Zeph Energy works with a lot is installing electric vehicle charging infrastructure, or something like purchasing clean vehicles for state or city vehicle fleets. And there's a whole list online on the direct pay website, the direct pay White House site. But those are just some of the highlights. And then there are just some, fairly, I would say minimal requirements like paying prevailing wage and using registered apprentices will help get the maximum amount of funding possible. You can keep going, Will. So here's an example. The city of Vroomville, haha, it's a funny name, installs a 150 kW fast charger in their city for public use. Through direct pay, the city was able to get up to 30% of the total cost of the charger back by applying for the tax credit. Just so we're all clear, I made up the city of Vroomville. They're not actually real. There are real world examples where a community has done this. This was just one for the purposes of this presentation. And if we say the 150 kW fast charging project has a total cost of $150,000, then 30% of that comes in between $40,000 and $50,000 that a community would be eligible to get back from this direct pay program. One thing that's important to note is the direct pay tax credit can be stacked on top of other grant funding. So if there are other grants that a community wanted to apply for to help cover the cost of their EV charging project, direct pay can still be utilized, but you're only able to get up to 30% until the total project cost is more than what still needs to be paid. So the way I can explain that is if the total cost of a 150 kW fast charger is $150,000, but the community of Vroomville already has $110,000 of existing grant funding that they've gotten, then the community would only be eligible to get the rest of the $40,000 with the direct pay program. Basically, eligible entities, they're not able to pocket extra money from the grant, even if the total amount they're technically eligible for is higher. So you can go on to the next slide, Will. Then the big question is how to apply. Well, the simple answer is to file a tax return. The IRS has effectively made it so organizations can receive direct pay program payments as a check or electronically, basically like a tax return overpayment. And qualified entities would just need to file for a registration number with the IRS if they don't already have one, which they can then use to file for the direct pay credit. I think it's Form 990T. But if you're interested, I would encourage you to go online and find the direct pay page on the whitehouse.gov website. There's a lot of info, a lot more high-level overview on the program. There's an FAQ document. They have better instructions on how to actually apply than I could ever give because taxes are confusing, I'll say it. So I would encourage you all to check that out if it's something you'd be interested in utilizing. You can hop on to the next slide, Will. So as Zeph likes to say, now is the time. I like the term the chicken before the egg approach. It's been bearing a lot of fruit in St. Paul and Minneapolis, where companies like us have, or not just companies, but cities and townships and communities have taken advantage of a lot of this existing grant funding. But the demand for electric vehicles is only going to go up, and so there will be continued need to expand the network. And honestly, funding is available now more than ever to develop EV charging as a community amenity. And there's a whole list of other funding programs on the other side. Obviously a NEVI or a CFI grant are really hard to get. But if you get one, they're a lot of money and they put in a really, really high powered, high level charger. Um, and then there's another list, a couple more listed here. I would just encourage you to check out, see what's available in your community, your state. Do a little bit of research. There's a lot of money out there right now. That 8+ billion before the end of 2027 is not an inaccurate statistic. So check it out. Will, I'll toss over back to you if you have anything else to add.
Yeah, I'll just say, we'll through the Golden Shovel folks, we'll share a copy of this presentation, and we'll put a couple of links in this slide, to the IRS direct pay, and also there's another resource that you can look at based on the state and community you're in that sort of does a good job of highlighting these types of grant programs like NEVI and CFI, as well as other local incentives that may be available at the state level or through the local utility, which all sort of exist. And as Will touched on, like things like NEVI and CFI, those are competitive grant programs. So it's a much heavier lift than something like direct pay, which by comparison, should be much more easily achieved for a given project. And with that, I think we'll, kind of open it up to any questions.
Yeah, so we've got a couple come in. Thank you guys. The first one, could you tell us how much it would cost for a business to install an EV charger in front of their business or nearby? How much would the electric bill go up for that business?
So it's a big range. So there's a number of factors that kind of come into play. There's the type of charger. So level 2 is just by default going to be much less expensive than a DC fast charger. Both the equipment and the infrastructure required are, less expensive for level 2 than DC fast charge. The site itself kind of comes into play. So if there's capacity at the site, the location is the next thing that can be a big sort of cost driver. So we've got electrical capacity, the location of the equipment, which is sort of mostly tied to how close is it to that electrical service that's going to be servicing the equipment. So if you have electrical capacity, or you're able to put in charging that fits within the capacity that you have at a site, and you're able to install it relatively close, it's going to be much less of a cost than if you have to bring in a new service, or if you're installing it further away from an existing service. So installing a level 2 product in close proximity to power that you have available, or multiple level 2s that are leveraging a load control that allows it to stay within the capacity, and you're installing it close, you're probably looking somewhere in the, you could start at $5,000 to $10,000 for the installation. Or if you are installing it far away, you have to do trenching. Sticking with the level 2 example, you have to do landscaping and things like that. For existing construction, you're sort of redoing it. Then that project could, potentially double or even triple in cost if you have to bring in a new electrical service and things like that. DC fast charging projects are typically going to be, well over $100,000, kind of and up, given all those sort of same considerations. So it's a wide range. And then as far as the electrical bill goes, again, you know, there are thousands of different utilities across the country. They all have different rate structures. You know, some parts of the country have things like demand charges or time of use pricing, which, you know, with a system like the ones that Zeph offers, we can, our platforms allows for you to, you know, control the maximum load to avoid demand charges, set different price structures based on different time of use rates. So you're, you know, if you're going to, since, you know, you'd want to build the drivers for the usage of the power. You know, the idea ultimately is to offset the utility increase by the money that you charge for using the infrastructure. So the utility bill would go up, but you're generating enough revenue through the charging to cover that and then some. So yeah, so utility is a really tough one. We've got a number of tools, you know, that we could probably include a link as well to that, where you can actually type in your utility rate and get an idea of, you know, what the hardware would cost, what the impact on the utility rate would be, and then what rate you might set to kind of offset those costs.
Yeah, and thanks, Will. And I would add to that, you know, they're kind of, you know, pros and cons with either, right? Like a level 2 is much less expensive than a DCFC, but it's a much slower charge too. And level 2s are great. Don't get me wrong, they're durable, they get the job done. They just simply take longer to charge the car. Whereas with the DCFC, you know, it's a fast charge. To be honest, it's probably a bigger draw to a site if there's a DCFC, you know, especially if it's a business. Um, but the cost of installation is much higher, which is, you know, a big reason we had that whole section whole section on federal funding in this presentation, because that's a really good way to make it more affordable right now, you know, because this technology is expensive. So thanks.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, you know, it's you know, selecting the right equipment for the location, for the use case, um, is is really important. And like Will said, there's a lot of funding available right now, especially for DC fast charge, but also for level 2 to kind of offset those costs.
Okay, another question. How much have businesses charged so far for EV power? How do they charge their customers? For example, like a gas station would charge per gallon for gas.
Yeah, they're typically charging by kilowatt hour. So the kilowatt hour is sort of the electric vehicle's gallon of gas. And it's the, you know, sort of measurement of electricity dispensed, right? Um, so it yeah, so they're typically charging by the kilowatt hour. The stations themselves, the way that the, you know, payment would take place, you could have a, you know, credit card reader built in, and then, or also they can pay through like a mobile app, or a QR code. So that's how drivers actually, you know, kind of facilitate the transaction. It's done right at the station itself. Um, and rates, you know, that people charge per kilowatt hour, just as a super generalization, without taking into account any promotions or, you know, specials that may be offered to, you know, loyalty members and things like that, I'd say anywhere from, you know, 25 cents to 50 cents a kilowatt hour. In some cases, there's also, you know, sort of a plug-in fee. So a baseline fee, and then it's a per kilowatt hour charge on top of that. In some parts of the country, they are able to charge for time connected as well. So after a charge is complete, you may switch to a connection rate, which is actually designed to encourage turnover at the equipment. So let's say you're plugged in, you finish charging, and then all of a sudden the rate switches to, well, now you're paying $1 a minute that you're plugged in, or, you know, some rate that they establish to encourage folks to, you know, unplug and move their vehicle to open up the spot.
Thank you. Switching gears a little bit, how does a transit stop nearby affect where a city would put an EV charging station?
Ooh, I can take this one. This is a good question. So this is a really good example for Minneapolis and St. Paul, or big cities especially. Um, for example, um, let's say I'm an EV driver and my office building is right in downtown Minneapolis, and my company doesn't pay for my parking. Parking is expensive downtown in cities, and so if there's a cheap way for, if I could just park my car at a transit station, charge my car through, throughout the day, probably on a level 2 rather than a DCFC, um, then that's an awesome alternative for me. Um, so definitely, you will see EV drivers, if they don't want to bring their car downtown, or if they don't want to park downtown slash pay for parking, a transit stop would be a great place for them to park that car. And if there's a level 2 there, then they can just kind of hop on that level 2 and charge as needed throughout the day. Um, so I definitely think it's a very relevant example for a big city like Minneapolis, St. Paul that have big transit systems, but obviously less of an example for small communities. Do you have anything to add to that, Will?
No, I think that was, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Well, you've kind of given me a good segue into the next question. Have you worked with smaller rural communities? Any suggestions for them?
Yes, actually, I'll tackle this first and then turn it over to Will, because my job is almost entirely working with small rural communities. Um, the biggest thing that I would encourage you to do, is just search out that federal funding. Because a lot of rural community, in my opinion, rural communities are poised to benefit the most from a lot of this new infrastructure. If you're a rural community and you're able to put a DC fast charger, right in your community, and your community is right along like a highway or an interstate, you're poised to get a lot more traffic into your community. Because EV drivers, like to take road trips, like to, find communities where they can charge their car. There's a whole subsect of EV drivers right now that literally just drive around looking for chargers. Um, but I would just encourage small communities to look for that federal funding. Direct pay would be an awesome resource for you guys. Um, and my favorite type of, nonprofit to work with would be like a small community, just because it really changes the conversation. I've had a number of conversations in the last couple of months, most of them being with really small communities where, I kind of gave them the overview on some of our product costs, and they were a little skeptical. They were like, listen, our you know our budget can't handle this. We have maybe a more conservative city council that doesn't want to put the money in right now. Um, and then I told them about direct pay, and they were like, "Oh wow, we can get $45,000 back after this has gone in. That changes everything." So definitely, keeping those opportunities in mind, and look around your areas, because sometimes there are like, development corporations, or just like economic development entities, are sometimes able to chip in money too. Or maybe, the maybe the utility, the power provider is willing to, if nothing else, kick in some of the utility make ready costs, for a small community to install a DCFC. It's really just all about kind of, you know, getting a good overview of it, seeing where your resources are, and trying to take advantage of as much funding as possible. Because, I mean, believe me, as I know, it's expensive, and it's harder for a small community to be able to afford something like that than a city like Minneapolis, St. Paul. Anything to add, Will?
Yeah, I would just echo that, there's a number of, funding programs that puts the community on the maps. These charging infrastructure databases, it just, it's a great way to kind of drive traffic into the community. and offer some compelling, amenities to residents that live there as well.
Bill, you might want to quit sharing your screen. I think we had a little glitch.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Next question. For direct pay, can a 501(c) act as an applicant and be used as a pass-through for funding if if a for-profit wants to install a charging station?
So it depends on the situation, from what I know. Obviously, the IRS is going to be more of an expert on this than I am. But we've seen a business want to host a charger at their site. And that's okay to do, just as long as the nonprofit entity is actually the owner of the station. So basically, let's say the city of Roomville wants to install a fast charger at one of their businesses, right? The business isn't necessarily gonna pay for it. The city wants to be the owner. They want to recoup the funding from, people charging. They want all those benefits, right? They can install a charger at a business's site, and that would be eligible for direct pay. It's just I'm kind of thinking that's what you meant by pass through. But if that doesn't answer the question, feel free to chime in again.
And I would say too, on the flip side, there is a similar credit available to tax-paying entities. So the business itself could, as a tax-paying entity, actually install the equipment, own and operate it, and get a similar type of rebate in the form of a tax credit.
Is the last question we've got for now. I think you may have kind of already answered this earlier. But maybe just another reminder. What is the total overall cost per EV charging station?
Yeah, and that's the one I guess I kind of danced around it because there's not really a specific answer. I gave a pretty big range of something, as a super straightforward, simple level 2 project being in the, kind of starting out the $5,000 to $10,000 range. And then, depending on infrastructure constraints, construction requirements, and things like that, that could easily, go, up to $20,000 or $30,000 or potentially more, assuming you're installing, multiple ports. And then DC fast charge kind of gave the baseline of, a project's going to probably be at least 100,000 to 150,000, and then, kind of going up from there. I would say that we can certainly act as a resource. If folks have specific locations or types of install projects, we can act as a resource to provide more specific project costs. But as a generalization, it can vary so widely. It's, yeah, those kind of baseline numbers that I gave are, definitely high level and baseline, with a lot of must be this or that to meet this sort of price point.
Makes sense. Thank you. That's all the questions that we have for now. When we're getting close to the top of the hour, so I think we'll wrap things up. If anyone does think of questions afterwards, don't hesitate to reach out to either of the Wills here or myself in that follow-up email, and I can make sure to connect you with them. Any final parting thoughts, Will or Will?
I would just say, like you said, feel free to reach out to either of us. We'd love to talk to you. If you're interested in working with Zeph on some kind of project, we're an EV solutions provider. So we'll definitely work to find whatever works best for you in your specific situation. So reach out to us anytime. Both Will and I would love to talk to you.
Thank you both so much for being here and sharing all of this knowledge with us. And thank you to everyone who registered and gave us an hour of your time.